Every morning you wake up, something is taken from you. Not by force, not by theft, not by any enemy you can name or any circumstance you can fight. It is taken in the most ordinary, invisible, completely unremarkable way possible. It is taken by the day itself, by the routines and the obligations and the notifications and the noise that fills every available space before you have had a single conscious thought about what you actually want your life to be. Another day. Gone. Another week. Slipping. Another year that somehow moved faster than the one before it, leaving behind the faint, uncomfortable residue of the question you never quite got around to asking. Is this it? Is this actually the life I chose? Or is this the life that assembled itself around me while I was busy being busy? Steve Jobs stood in front of the graduating class at Stanford University in 2005 and said something that should have changed every life in that auditorium. Something that should have stopped the world for a moment and made every human being with ears and a heartbeat reconsider the way they were spending the only non-renewable resource they would ever be given. He said, if today were the last day of your life, would you want to be doing what you are about to do today? He said he had been asking himself that question every morning for 33 years. And he said that whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew something had to change. When was the last time you asked that question? When was the last time the answer was yes? It is 1985. Steve Jobs is 30 years old, and he has just been fired. Not from some mid-level position at a company he barely cared about. He has been fired from Apple, the company he founded, the company he built from nothing, from a garage, from a vision, from the specific, burning, almost religious conviction that technology could be not just functional, but beautiful. That computers could change the world, not by making calculation easier, but by putting genuinely transformative creative power into the hands of ordinary people. He built that company. He recruited the people. He fought the board. He pushed and pushed and pushed with a relentlessness that made him difficult to work with and impossible to ignore until Apple became something the world had never seen before. The Macintosh. The mouse. The graphical interface that made personal computing accessible to human beings who had never thought of themselves as technical people. And then the board of directors, the people he had invited into the company, the people he had trusted to help him scale what he had built, voted to remove him. He lost the power struggle. He was forced out. He was 30 years old, at the most public, most humiliating possible moment, stripped of the company that was, in the deepest sense, an expression of who he was. Told by the people closest to him that his vision, his leadership, his way of being in the world was not what the company needed. He has described that period as devastating, as feeling like a very public failure, as the kind of experience that makes you question not just your career decisions, but your fundamental worth as a person. And the world, the technology press, the investors, the industry observers who watch these things, largely agreed. Apple without Jobs was going to be fine. Jobs without Apple was a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting a visionary run a company without adult supervision. The story was over, except it was not. Let me speak about something that we do not talk about honestly enough. Most of us are not living the life we intended, not because we failed dramatically, not because something catastrophic happened that derailed the plan, but because the life we intended, the version of our existence that we felt, somewhere in our 20s or our teens or whenever we first touched the specific thing that made us feel most alive, that life got quietly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, replaced by something more manageable, more practical, more expected, more legible to the people around us whose approval we needed more than we ever admitted. We made sensible decisions. We took the safer job instead of the riskier one that made our stomach jump. We stayed in the city because the connections were there. We postponed the project, the move, the conversation, the leap, indefinitely, because the timing was not right and the conditions were not ideal, and there was always a more reasonable moment waiting just around the corner. And the years accumulated, and the version of ourselves that we had imagined, the writer, the builder, the artist, the entrepreneur, the person who was going to do something that mattered, started to feel less like a plan and more like a fantasy. And we got better at not thinking about it. better at filling the space where that question used to live with enough busyness and enough distraction and enough reasonable explanation for why this particular life, right here, is actually fine. This is not failure in the dramatic sense. This is the most common human tragedy. The quiet foreclosure of possibility. The slow, dignified, entirely socially acceptable way of never becoming who you were. Steve Jobs knew this territory, not just from the outside looking in, from the inside, from the specific darkness of sitting with the knowledge that the thing you built, the expression of everything you believed about what was possible, had been taken from you, and that the world was not waiting for your return. The press was writing him off. The industry was moving on. And Jobs was sitting with the kind of silence that only comes when the thing that gave your life its organizing principle is suddenly gone, and you have to find out, in the most unmediated possible way, who you are without it. Here is what Jobs did in the years after Apple. He did not retire. He did not become bitter. He did not spend his energy trying to reclaim what had been taken. He started over. He founded Next, a new computer company, more ambitious in some ways than what Apple had been, less commercially successful, but technologically extraordinary. The operating system Next developed would eventually become the foundation on which modern macOS and iOS were built. The long game was already being played. He just did not know it yet. He acquired a small computer graphics division from filmmaker George Lucas and turned it into Pixar. He invested. He believed. He fought for the company's survival through years of financial difficulty and internal doubt. And in 1995, 10 years after being fired from Apple, Toy Story was released. The first fully computer-animated feature film in history. A revolution in storytelling and technology, and human imagination. And in 1997, Apple, struggling, nearly bankrupt, having burned through every alternative solution the board could devise, acquired Next. And with the acquisition, Jobs returned, not as a visitor, as the CEO. He walked back into the company he had built, and over the next decade, he created the iMac, the iPod, iTunes, the iPhone, the iPad, and the App Store. He transformed Apple from a company on the edge of bankruptcy into the most valuable company in human history at the time of his death. The man the board had decided was not needed turned out to be the only person who could do what needed to be done. But here is what matters most about this story. It is not the commercial triumph. It is not the revenge narrative of the visionary vindicated. It is what Jobs said about those 12 years between being fired and returning. He said it was the most creatively liberated period of his life. He said that being fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him. That the heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. That losing everything forced him back to the only thing that had ever actually mattered, the work itself. The love of making something. The pure, unmediated, unjustified by outcome joy of building. The turning point was not his return to Apple. The turning point was understanding, in the specific bone-deep way that only real loss can teach, that the work was never about the outcome. The work was the point. The doing was the point. The being fully alive in the act of creation was the point. And that realization, that understanding, is available to every person watching this, without the firing, without the loss. Right now. The first lesson. Your time is the only thing you are actually spending. Jobs said it in multiple forms across his life, most clearly at Stanford, most urgently in the private knowledge, which he carried for years before most people knew, that his time was not infinite. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2003. He kept it private at first. He sat with the knowledge that the clock everyone runs against abstractly, philosophically, comfortably at a distance. He sat with that clock becoming suddenly, terrifyingly specific. Not someday, now. He said that remembering you are going to die is the best tool he ever found to help make the big choices in life. Because when you hold the reality of your own death clearly, not as a distant eventuality but as an actual scheduled, approaching appointment, the things that other people think of you, the fear of embarrassment, the comfort of the safe choice, all of it falls away. What remains is what actually matters. Most of us live as though we have a vast surplus of time. We treat it as the resource that can always be replenished, the meeting that can always be rescheduled, the life that can always be revised in the next version, and the days disappear, and the weeks disappear, and then one morning you are 45 or 55 or 65, and you are looking back at the landscape of your choices, and you are trying to find in that landscape the evidence of the life you actually wanted to live. Start counting now, not to create anxiety, to create clarity. Your time is the only thing you are actually spending. Every hour you give to something that does not matter is an hour you are taking from something that does. The second lesson, you cannot connect the dots looking forward, only looking back. This is the lesson that requires the most faith, and it is the lesson that Jobs lived most completely. Before he founded Apple, Jobs dropped out of Reed College after one semester. He felt guilty about the tuition cost his adoptive parents were paying. But he stayed on campus for another 18 months, sleeping on floors, eating free meals at the Hare Krishna temple, attending only the classes that genuinely interested him. One of those classes was calligraphy, typography, the history of beautiful letter forms, serifs and sans serifs, the spacing between letters that makes text feel alive rather than merely legible. He had no idea why he was there. He had no practical application for this knowledge. There was no dot to connect forward from a calligraphy class in Oregon to anything he could see on the horizon. 10 years later, when he was designing the Macintosh, the calligraphy class became the beautiful typography that made the Mac's text unlike anything in the computing world. It became one of the features that made the personal computer genuinely personal, human, warm, worthy of the name that Jobs gave to the ideal he was always chasing, insanely. Great, you cannot see the connections from where you are standing. The thing you are doing today that feels like a detour may be the most essential part of the route. The skill you are developing in the quiet space between the things that are supposed to matter may be the exact capability that makes the defining work of your life possible. Trust the dots. Do the thing that makes you come alive, especially when you cannot yet see where it leads. The third lesson, doing work you love is not a luxury. It is a prerequisite. Jobs said this with a directness that bordered on urgency. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Most people treat this as naive, as the kind of advice that works for people who are lucky enough to find a passion that pays, as inspiration that does not survive contact with rent and mortgages and the practical reality of what the job market actually offers. But Jobs was not talking about passion in the shallow hashtag sense. He was talking about something deeper and more demanding, the specific gravity that pulls you back to certain kinds of problems, the work that you find yourself doing when no one is watching, and no one is paying, and there is no external reward to justify the hours. He said the passion is not something you find sitting still. It is something that develops through doing, through making, through the long, imperfect, deeply unglamorous process of getting good at something that genuinely matters to you, and then better, and then extraordinary. If you have not found it yet, keep looking. Do not settle. Keep looking, because settling, accepting work that diminishes rather than develops you, is the slow, quiet way of spending your life on someone else's dream while yours waits patiently for a tomorrow that never quite arrives. The fourth lesson, death is not the enemy. Unlived life is. In 2005, Jobs knew something the Stanford graduate sitting in front of him did not yet know. He had been told the previous year that he had a form of pancreatic cancer. He had been told initially to go home and get his affairs in order, that he had 3 to 6 months to live. He did not go home. He had surgery. The cancer was treatable, a rare form that was operable. He survived, and he stood at that podium in 2005 carrying the specific, earned first-hand knowledge of what it means to face the end of your time and look back at what you did with it. He said no one wants to die. Even the people who want to go to heaven do not want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It clears out the old to make way for the new. The unlived life The dream you kept postponing. The conversation you never had. The work you never started. The person you kept meaning to become. These do not disappear when you die. They disappear before that. They disappear in the accumulation of days where you chose the comfortable thing over the true thing, the known thing over the alive thing. Death is not what takes your life. Unlived life is. I want to take you to October 5th, 2011, the day Steve Jobs died. He was 56 years old. By almost any measure, a full life. A life that created things that billions of people hold in their hands every day. A life that changed music and film and communication, and the very way that human beings understand what technology can be. And yet, his sister, the novelist Mona Simpson, delivered his eulogy. She was with him in his final hours, and she described what she witnessed at the moment of his death with a simplicity that broke something open in everyone who read it. She said his last words were not about business or legacy or the company or the products or any of the things the world associated with his name. His last words were, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." I want you to sit with that for a moment. The man who spent his life insisting on wonder, who pushed every person and every product and every room he ever walked into to be more than adequate, more than functional, more than merely sufficient. Who believed, with a passion that made him difficult and demanding and brilliant and transformative, that the details matter and the beauty matters and the work matters and the doing it right matters. That man, at the last moment of his consciousness, encountered something that made him say, "Oh wow." What was he seeing? We cannot know. We will never know. But I want to ask you something. When you come to that moment, whenever it comes, however it comes, what will the life behind you look like? Will there have been enough mornings when the answer to the question was yes? Will there have been enough days when you chose the work that mattered over the work that was safe? Enough moments when you were fully, completely, genuinely present in the life you were actually living rather than the life you were planning to get to eventually? Will there have been enough? Oh wow? Because your life is slipping away. Right now. Not dramatically. Not loudly. In the exact ordinary, unremarkable way that it always does. In the morning that is already half gone, and the year that is already 3/4 done, and the version of yourself that you have been meaning to become since longer ago, than you are comfortable admitting. Steve Jobs was given a second chance when the cancer turned out to be operable. He used it. Every day. Until he could not anymore. You have a second chance too. It is called right now. Here is the question I want you to take with you. Not as a concept. As a practice. As something you actually do tomorrow morning before the day assembles itself around you and takes the choice away. If today were the last day of your life, would you want to be doing what you are about to do today? Not forever. Not every day in perpetuity. Just today. Just this one day. Is what you are about to do with your hours an expression of the life you actually want? Or is it another day of the accumulated default, the comfortable, sensible, socially acceptable way of spending time that adds up year by year to a life that happened rather than a life that was chosen? If the answer is no, something has to change. Not next month. Not after the project finishes or the debt clears or the kids are older or the timing improves. Something has to change in the direction of your life, starting with the next decision you make. It does not have to be enormous. It does not have to be a resignation letter or a plane ticket or a dramatic gesture that changes everything overnight. Jobs did not rebuild his life in a day. He rebuilt it one decision at a time, through 12 years of choosing the work over the comfort, the truth over the approval, the alive thing over the safe thing. Start with one decision, the one you have been postponing, the one that has been waiting at the edge of your awareness for longer than you want to admit. The conversation, the application, the project, the commitment to finally, actually, genuinely begin. Because here is what Steve Jobs understood that most people never do. Your life is not happening to you. Your life is the sum of your choices. And every day that passes without a conscious choice is a day that chose itself, usually in favor of inertia, of comfort, of the version of your life that requires the least from you. You are capable of more than that version. You know you are, you have always known. The dots you cannot connect yet are waiting. The work that will make you feel most alive is waiting. The version of yourself that looks back at a life fully lived and says, without reservation, without regret, with the complete peace of someone who left nothing important undone. That version is waiting. Go today, now, before another day slips past you in the way that days always do when you are not paying attention. Oh wow is waiting. Make a life worthy of it. If this reached something in you that needed reaching, share it. Not for the view count. For the person in your life who is quietly spending their days in a life they did not fully choose. Subscribe for more stories that do not entertain you. They demand something from you. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing in your life right now that you know needs to change but you have been putting off? Say it out loud. That is where it starts.